when you're all by yourself on an island as an entrepreneur, it becomes really tough. Emotionally, spiritually, financially, it's a tough gig. And so by being around these entrepreneurs that had such positive energy about entrepreneurship and about their belief in all of the other EOers being successful, it enabled me to kind of get past some of the barriers that perhaps were in my mind at the time.
Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Hi, Robert Hartline here with The Decision, EO's Nashville's podcast for driven entrepreneurs who are navigating their lives in their business with that decision that they need to make. Maybe they're struggling with. This whole podcast is storytelling about those decisions that we've made in our lives and our businesses. Today I have Scott Spiro. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to be here, Robert.
This is our first time actually spending time together. You've been in Nashville for quite a while, from LA.
Yeah.
Been in EO since 2013. What brought you to Nashville?
Well, first off, I have family here. So my mom is originally from Lenore City, which is near Knoxville.
Yeah, I used to have a store out there.
Yeah,
I know Lenore City well.
Very good. And so I'd been coming out here as a kid, coming to family reunions, and got to go to space camp down in Huntsville a couple times. That was a real treat. And so I always enjoyed coming here. And then I've been part of a peer group for the past 10 years or so that meets out here in Franklin and in Nashville. So I'd been coming out for some time before I made the move. But during the pandemic, being in Los Angeles, everything was shut down. Kids had been out of school for a good year. We had some challenges with, homeless people coming through. And that wasn't, we lived in a pretty nice area by the beach.
It's like the typical story.
I'm sure. I mean,
yeah,
you know what? I just woke up one morning and it was really this quick. And I just said, you know what? I think it's time to go.
Yeah.
I think I've had enough.
Yeah, had enough.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about, what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor?
When I was growing up, I had different jobs. I did paper route, which was fun. I was always, doing things. But I'd say the first thing that I did on my own was a DJ business that I had. I kind of started up kind of towards the end of high school. And I was lucky because, my parents supported that. My dad was really behind that. And so he would always be very encouraging. And
it's really hard back then to make any money DJing because you had to buy all the equipment and buy all the records. And then it's funny. I had a paper route and I also was a DJ. So we have the same.
Okay, so we might know the same thing. And you had to be strong, like you said, right? Because we didn't have everything on the internet. It wasn't streaming.
Yeah.
And this was even before CDs. The CDs were starting to come. Yeah. But the CDs were coming at this point. But the vinyl weighed a lot. When CDs did come along, they weighed a lot in their plastic cases. So that was the first thing that I did, if I remember.
What about your first business that you had employees and?
Yeah. Well, that came a little bit later because for me, I'm in the technology space. I always had a knack for computers. I was good at computers. I even ran a little bulletin board system back in the 80s that got hacked while I was on vacation.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. Came back and nothing was there. So it was always a hobby for me. It wasn't something that I intended to do. But while I was running the DJ business and I was going to college, I was focused on getting a degree in theater at UCLA. And that was kind of my intention. It wasn't really the entrepreneurial road necessarily. Problem was, once I finished at UCLA, I had only 6 months. My dad was saying, hey, this is what you've got. And then you've got to get out. Then you're on your own. I'm done, bankrolling you. And true to his word, that's what happened. And so I was doing your typical jobs like waiting on tables and that kind of thing. Problem was I was terrible. And I would just get let go from those jobs. And Actually, that was a good thing because one of the managers said to me, called me to the back, and I knew that wasn't a good thing. He said, Scott, some people aren't cut out to be waiters. I'm not cut out to be a waiter. That's why I'm a manager. And I don't think you're cut out to be a waiter either. And it was the best piece of advice, right? So
it wasn't like that at first.
No. So that kind of caused me to look at other options. And so I did. I took other jobs. I worked at CompUSA. I did other things. And while I was doing that, that's when I started my business on the side. And it took a bit of time before I started to hire that first person to help me.
Now, what was your first business? What was it named?
The first business, not the DJ, right? Because DJ, we had custom sound and digital DJs. Yeah. All right. weddings, bar bar mitzvahs, all that. Okay. Then the IT side, the computer thing, that was called Computer Solutions Group or CSG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did it become SugarShot?
That didn't come till much later. So Computer Solutions Group was a company that I built over the years. Started around probably 96. And then I merged my company in with a buddy of mine's company to make SugarShot. And that was in 2018.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was the biggest decision you had to make in the very beginning?
The biggest decision I had to make in the very beginning was to have the courage to do what everybody else told me was probably not going to work.
Oh, wow.
Which was simply to start your own business and not be working at another company. For the most part, by and large, people thought that was a pretty outlandish idea. But as I said, because I wasn't really capable of holding down the waiting on tables jobs, I naturally fell into it. I felt like I could do it. And I was encouraged, as I said, by my family and my dad to go and do it, which helped a lot.
When did you start picking up steam where it was actually a functional business where you're actually making money?
Yeah, well, let's see. That didn't take that long. I was making money functionally within a few years. Probably, let's see, I started around 1996. So by 1999, it was a full-fledged business. I mean, I probably had maybe 15 employees, 20 employees by that point. Of course, then we ran into the bubble bursting in 1999, which was a real challenge.
You thought you guys were going to make a ton of money with the 2000 turnover?
I thought so. But I also knew that a lot of the excitement wasn't really around what we were doing. A lot of the excitement was around the websites and the internet and people building SaaS services and things like that. It wasn't so much around what we were doing, which was essentially handling the networks and building computers and things.
Who was Scott before EO?
Well, Scott was a lot less educated around entrepreneurship before EO, right? And how the EO thing came to me, I hadn't heard of it until a friend of mine who was in a different peer group came to me, and he had an EO brochure with him. And we went out to dinner. We were here in Nashville, actually. Ironically, I didn't think about that till now. We were here in Nashville. He said, Scott, when your business hits $1 million of revenue, this is the phone number to call. And he gave me that. And we were probably around 750 at the time, I'd say, right?
Oh, wow.
So he gave me that brochure, and I kept that brochure on my desk, and I had the number circled. And sure enough, once I hit that $1 million, that's when I made the call.
It just occurred to me how many entrepreneurs I've actually talked to that qualification that we have in EO, that $1 million becomes a point in which that they are aiming towards. Mm-hmm. That it never occurred to me because I've heard this over and over, but I never thought about these conversations happening and like, oh, wait, I got a goal. I'm going here. Wow. It
was really important. And I'll tell you, because for me, I really looking back on it, I wasn't so much driven to hit, say, a KPI like top line revenue or anything else. The only thing that I cared about at the time and why I started the business was because I wanted to be able to buy anything at Fry's Electronics that I wanted to. And there was any computer that I wanted to and any game that I wanted to. So for me, it was definitely a lifestyle kind of business at the beginning. So having somebody come and say, hey, why don't you set yourself a goal and let it be this so that you can join EO worked out for me. And it could have been $1 million. It could have been more than that, it gave me something to shoot for.
So what was the first year like of joining EO? What changed with either you or the business? What things were you maneuvering?
Well, when I joined EO, obviously the company was a bit larger and it was a bit more complex, but I didn't really understand that we actually had, within our business, we actually had different smaller businesses running at different cadences. This is the way in my industry, we call it managed service provider. And so we're actually running different businesses and they run different cadences and they all have different KPIs. I didn't really understand that. And what EO did, it did a lot. One of those things was helping me recognize that my business was probably more complex than I had realized in a way. But it also gave me an opportunity to be around entrepreneurs that weren't specific to my industry. These were entrepreneurs that were running all sorts of businesses and they had all sorts of different personalities as well. But by and large, most of them had very positive energy about them. And when you're all by yourself on an island as an entrepreneur, it becomes really tough. Emotionally, spiritually, financially, it's a tough gig. And so by being around these entrepreneurs that had such positive energy about entrepreneurship and about their belief in all of the other EOers being successful, it enabled me to kind of get past some of the barriers that perhaps were in my mind at the time. And so I continued to go. Yeah. Right. So
what was the biggest decision that you can recall that EO was helpful, whether in a forum setting where you brought a deep dive conversation to help you navigate a decision? Do you have anything like that to share?
Well, I would say that sort of, at the time I was more involved with, being on the board, going to, events, going to other countries. That was huge for me. And my forum experience was not as successful due to a number of different reasons. And for me, my forum success has been more recent, to be honest. I'm just trying to think back then.
Well, it's really interesting because, if you're new to EO, there's a process to get you in a forum. And I think a lot of people, and I think we do a really good job of it now.
Yeah.
But I think in the past, and I just don't remember what it was like for me because I just got put in a form of new guys and it worked out beautifully. It was like,
that's what happened to me too, by the way. Same process.
But in hindsight, I think what they do really well now is like remind us that we decide our EO experience. And we are in control of that experience. And if we don't like the experience, we can change it.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling the group of people that you were presented to, you can try other forums.
That's a very important point. And my learning from that first forum and we were all new at the time, the learning was an interesting one. And the learning was to take the time to find the right forum, that you don't need to necessarily take the first one. And I knew quickly that something was a little off. And the actual what actually had happened was that we had our very first retreat. And on that day, I had been called by Microsoft. Actually, it was maybe the day before, and said, Scott, we really would need your help on a forum panel that we're doing at a company. It was a huge opportunity for me. It was the kind of opportunity that is not easy to say no to, nor would you.
Right.
And so I said, I'll do it. And then so I was late. I was probably an hour or two late for that retreat. And the forum members, some in particular, weren't all that happy about it. And they made the point to say, look, we're all here. You agreed to be here. And we feel that maybe you're not right for the forum if you're not willing to make that sacrifice. And I thought about it for a moment and I understood their position. And my response was, if any of you had the opportunity that I just had in your businesses, I would have felt that you should go, right? Yeah. And I felt off and I felt let down and I felt de-energized
Wow. Yeah.
And so,
and you bring up a really good point because both of you are right.
yeah. And so the group that I'm in now, and we've had these discussions, and we all feel the same way, that if you have that opportunity, go take it. We are in supportive of your success.
Yeah.
And it's that particular group. And that was a learning for me, although I didn't know it at the time. It took a bit, that particular kind of group wasn't the right fit for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. My very first form experience, we're doing form training, and I think the form leader was starting the meeting. It was like starting at 8:00 in Nashville. Is like any meeting start at 8:00 is just like insane. You got to be super early or something's going to happen. And one of my form mates bebop in at like 8:03 or something. And she looks at her watch, looks at him and says, "Did you not read the sign on the door? It says, do not come in if you're not here at 8. Da, da, da." And he had this stunned look on his face. I was stunned. I felt so bad for him. I was like, oh no, this is horrible. And so he had to leave. He couldn't do the training until the next time. And it did a couple of things. It made all of us like super obsessed about, being on time, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But it did set a standard. And I think there needs to be in this level of flexibility, because yes, these opportunities, I am not going to say no to something that is incredible.
Yeah.
But the question is like, how incredible does it need to be and it gives it on this whole rabbit hole, but now you have a form that you enjoy.
Yeah. And that type of trust takes time, right?
It does.
I'm in a group now. The members of that group have been in EO for a while. They get it. And we have the forum rules that we've established. And the forum rule says that if you're late, you're going to pay for dinner. But there's been times the guys will walk in for 4 minutes late. It's like, you know what? It happens, sometimes it happens, and there's a bit of grace there. Right. So, and I think that's important, but all that being said, you would ask me about decisions that maybe I had to make or that EO helped me with, and whether I was in a forum or not. What EO gave me was the network of friends that I could call on if I needed to, and vice versa. And that was all built by going to events, putting myself out there, going for coffee, just little things like that.
What was the biggest decision you've had to make in your entrepreneurial career?
Well, there's been more than one. I think the one that comes to mind would be probably the merger of my business that I've been working on with my buddy's company, right? He had come to me about that, and it took about a year for me to kind of work through whether that was a great plan or not. But that was coming to that decision and then executing on that was probably one of the biggest.
Yeah. How did you navigate that?
One of my EO friends had a book called The Partnership Charter. And I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a solid book. And we went through that book and kind of did our best to answer the questions that were in the book. And that helped us navigate. The other thing that I did that I think is really important is I had good advisors, not just in EO, but even outside. For example, I had a good friend of mine. Actually, I think he was an EO member. Come to think of it, an EO Perth maybe. And I had seen him speak. He was, it was at an event an industry event. He was great. And I got to know him a little bit, and he really was, he was helping me out. And we talked about the idea of him coming on as an advisor to the business. And we worked out a business arrangement to make that feasible for him. So as he would come in and travel from Australia into the States, he would stop by every quarter, spend a couple of days, kind of almost like a facilitator, but also essentially a board advisor. And he was with me for, a couple of years prior to the merger. And then one of the conditions of the merger was I wanted him to stay on board as an executive advisor for that new business.
How did you navigate bringing two cultures together and joining forces? What was that like? And who did what? How did you navigate those kind of decisions?
Well, we did our best to understand the cultures prior to the merger, right? What was important and what were the values of one business versus the other. And I think we did a good job to understand how that worked. But when you bring two cultures together, invariably there's going to be differences of opinion. And we ended up creating a new culture is what we did. So we had the two different cultures. And while I think we did that fairly well, certainly hindsight being 2020, I would have done things different. I certainly think I would have done differently. And I've learned from, but it's hard to see the forest through the trees sometimes.
Yeah.
But what we did was created a new culture. We hired somebody who has a focus in culture building to create new culture cornerstones and establish that for the teams. And you also have to be able to tell the story to the two teams. Not everybody is, wanting to merge companies. It's any sort of change, can be scary or uncomfortable.
So in this new, as you're starting this new entity, this new merger of these two businesses, what was your role and what is your unique ability? What is something that you're uniquely designed to do?
Well, in my original company, Computer Solutions Group, I functioned as a CEO founder role. In the new business, my friend and partner, it was important for him. He wanted that role. And so for me, I took on a co-founder role with got focus around our business development. But really my, what I get energy from is going out into the world and really talking with people, building relationships, and where that, for our business, that was helping acquire new business, helping us form new partnerships with other companies like ours, because a lot of us work together, working with vendors and choosing vendors and establishing vendors. I do a fair bit of news expert works going on television, ABC World News, Good Morning America, and others, and helping tell the story around ways in which people should be protecting themselves against cybersecurity threats and so forth. I really enjoy that. I enjoy helping people. And so that was what I was doing.
What should a business be doing right now to prepare for cybersecurity, things that we're not even ready for yet? What should be top of mind for anyone right now for their business? Well,
as it pertains to cybersecurity, there's a lot to unpack on that. But at the basics of it, you want to make sure that if you're starting up a new business or you've already got a business, to make sure that the basics are covered, meaning that your employees are in fact the weakest link when it pertains to cybersecurity threats. And what I mean by that is, well, I'll give an analogy. If I have a really nice security system on my house, let's just say physically, so it's got hardware and software, et cetera. And, but somebody learns about me through the internet and they showed up at my house and they rang the doorbell and my kid came to the door and said, "Who is it?" And this person said, "Oh, well, I'm a friend of your dad's." "Really?" My son says, How do you know him?" And this person says, "Well, I knew him from this or that, and he does this and that." And basically he just recites everything that he found. And my son says, "Wow, yeah, you must know him. Yeah, that sounds like you know him. All right, come on in." Opens the door. All bets are off on my security system, right?
Oh, wow.
It's the same thing in our businesses today. Cyber criminals leverage mostly social engineering nowadays to get themselves around the technology.
Yeah, how'd you get in? Oh, through the front door.
Through the front door. And so when you hear about these large companies, these large enterprise hospitals and organizations that have been breached, a lot of times it's because it was a vendor, maybe a smaller company, that the cyber criminals were able to manage to get through, and then they kind of ride in that way. And so, one of the best things to do is cover the basics, make sure that you have multi-factor authentication running, making sure that people are using that sort of thing to confirm that it is the right people accessing the computers, and then making sure your employees are trained on what to watch out for, because cyber criminals are always watching and always putting things in there because they know your team is busy and not looking.
How has the technology to protect one's business changed in the last several years?
Well, the technology itself, in some ways, has become easier to to implement and for it to just quietly do its thing. So the employees don't have to necessarily see too much of that, except for the multi-factor, right?
Right. We
have software to help manage passwords. We have applications to pop up on our watches or our phones to make sure we are who we say we are. The deployment of the technology continues to be a bit complex, and you need to have people that are kind of watching over that. And of course, AI is changing everything now too.
Yeah.
And we use AI in those tools to watch for behavior that might be a little off. So we're always trying to stay one step ahead of the cyber criminals, and they're always, trying to stay one step ahead of us.
So AI,
yeah,
where are we?
AI is one of those seismic shifts that we hear about, and it's a hot topic. But for a lot of people, I feel like they're still trying to figure out what's the practical use of this technology. So I can go on to ChatGPT and I can ask it maybe the same thing that I was going to search in Google, and it will give me an answer. It usually will give you a better answer. But where AI is really going and where it's moving very, very quickly, and we have to be aware of this from an entrepreneurship standpoint to leverage it, because where it's going is quite possibly replacing some of our key employees, right? The AI tools, and I've seen this technology doing its work, it's getting to the point where it can make fundamental business decisions that can help us move our businesses forward in a very cost-effective way. And in the IT space, in our space, for example, for SugarShot, we actually have a deep partnership with a company called Treeline. And Treeline is developing AI and automation technology in our space. And so they're working with companies like ours to develop the technology that will enable us to use AI to allow us to give a better client experience, and all of that.
The challenge that I've had with AI is it's moving so fast. Once I start getting in bed with a tool that I'm using, it's like there's some other tool better, and I feel like I'm not keeping up.
Yeah.
And I'm also realizing that there's a piece on the accountability chart specifically just for someone that just does AI.
Yeah.
To enable all the other departments to A, protect my data, but B, actually leverage the data to do powerful things. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're moving into, what you're getting to, is it's going to be replacing managerial level leaders. Because it's not you can do biz dev and some BDR stuff and that kind of stuff, but critical decision making, I'm seeing is far better than a leader on a team sometimes. And I've been using it for decision making. I've been using it, like I have all my culture index loaded. Mm-hmm. Like it's helping me navigate important decisions that have to be made.
Right.
Yeah. It's powerful.
That's what we're saying. And so for entrepreneurs, it makes sense to try to stay up on it. We're all on information overload right now. So it's not possible to know everything.
Right.
So better to have, try to get good at a couple of things and then leverage your network, your EO friends, to help you figure out where to focus yourself on the other stuff so that you can be more pragmatic about where to spend your energy and your time, which we only have so much of, right?
That's right. What would be your advice for a new EO member joining a forum, getting the best experience out of EO? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing that I would say is to take some time to meet with the administrative team within your EO chapter. Obviously in EO Nashville, we have an amazing team. And that's what I did, was to sit down with them and say, okay, how does this chapter work? How do the forums work? How do the events work? And who are the key people that maybe I should get to know that can help me navigate what's coming here, what the road looks like. Mm. And that certainly worked well for me. And I was introduced to a few key people, and they were very helpful. And then we would go out for coffee and meet people. And also, anytime I would be at an event and I would have a conversation, and I should say, you got to get out, right? That's the key. Everybody will say that. Got to make time, even when it's inconvenient, to go to an event, and you have to put yourself out there. You have to walk into a room of people that are strangers, and you got to have to talk to them. And for a lot of, a lot of people, that's not always easy. So that takes a bit of, go back to the courage theme, the courage to go out and put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so,
how do you get comfortable with that? Are you comfortable in those scenarios? Because I have talked to a lot of EO members that quite honestly are a little terrified of it.
I am overall comfortable with it. It sometimes depends on my mood of the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not comfortable with going out because I'm just, maybe tired and I just don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I do is when I go, I look for the people that I can tell are a bit uncomfortable. And I go in and talk to them. Because that does a couple of things. Number one is it helps them feel a bit more comfortable and start talking to somebody. And number two, it helps me because then I get to learn a bit about them. And I met some amazing entrepreneurs that way, running amazing businesses. They're just not social butterflies,
Yeah.
But that's something that you just got to do. And the other thing is that by and large, it's like working out. You don't necessarily want to go into the gym and work out. So what do you do? And I think about what the end result is going to be. Here's how you're going to feel when you're done. Because every time I've worked out and done, I've felt good. And I think about how will I feel after one of these events? And it's 100% success rate that when I leave any of these events, I feel better than I did when I got there. I can't always know what it's going to be. I don't know what the reason will be. I don't know what will happen. I just know something is going to happen. I'm 100% sure of that. I'm also 100% sure that if I stay home and do nothing, I'm 100% sure nothing will happen.
That is so true.
And I'll be right back where I started. So you just got to look at it that way with the end result in mind.
Step in a little bit discomfort.
Correct.
For a result.
Yeah. I did want to talk about, one of the ways that EO had really helped me with the decision I had made many, many years ago. This was about 10 years ago, was I had an employee. And in the employee turned out to be schizophrenic, right? And turned out to threaten some of my employees after he was let go. And that was very challenging because he was, threatening employees, threatening me. It was really through my EO group and talking to them that they helped me formulate a plan, which was to move my family down to my parents' house, kind of put them down there where they were safe.
Oh, this is a safety concern.
And move my team to another location, which was really brought us into the idea of co-location and co-working spaces at the time, taking them into WeWork. And so, it was a real threat to the business and I had to get a restraining order, et cetera. So my EO team was my EO group was very helpful during that time where you're dealing with employees.
How did the family feel about that? Because that had been scary.
Well, the kids didn't know, they were too young. My wife is very pragmatic. So she was pretty good about it.
But that had to have been kind of traumatizing.
It was. And it set the business on a different path because, where we were in one location, now we were working with multiple locations. I felt like I had to do something because to me, my employees were the most important thing to me, right? And they were essential to running the business. They needed to feel safe. And so the question was, well, should we stay in the same place or do we change the locale for them to be safe? And so within 3 days, via EO had a partnership with WeWork at the time, EO Los Angeles. And so we were able to leverage the EO relationship with WeWork, and we were able to have a co-working space spun up within 48 hours.
Oh, wow. It's so funny you're hearing that story because, literally at the talent show that we had last night event, I'm talking to an EO member who let go of a few employees that weren't performing.
Yeah.
And he spent all day, they were literally online, dragging him through the mud, making up stories, and then asking for a ransom, give me X dollars and I'll stop doing this. And I'm talking to him yesterday and he is fearful. He's angry. He feels trapped. And I'm going to make an intro with you and him because he needs someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Because I think we all had that one employee you fire and it just goes horribly bad. And, it's not to anybody's fault, but their feelings are hurt, and they, it's so complicated.
We all have many, if you're in business and you have employees, you're going to have employee stories, both some great experiences and really bad experiences. There's many of them. And part of the benefit of EO is getting that feedback on how to handle that. It's one of the toughest things that we deal with as entrepreneurs, because it doesn't have anything to do a lot of times with the core business, right? We provide cybersecurity or IT services, but a lot of these issues were completely separate from that. And at the end, what I want employees that exit well. They exit and go along their journey, and they look back and their experience with my company was fruitful for them, and it gave them the experience that they needed to move forward for their own success. That's what we want mostly, right? But invariably you have those things that go off. And you remember in the movie Jerry Maguire when he's trying to save all of his clients?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I first started out, I had one of those situations where one of my employees decided to team up with a couple other ones and started calling all of our customers, offering them. They knew my pricing, they knew everything, and they just started calling around. And I was, this was when the very beginning of my business, relatively speaking. I'd never been through that before. It was really hurtful. What did I do wrong? I thought I was doing everything right. Why would you be doing this? And, we had to go to remediation, and this guy was, really trying to get me going, so to speak. He really was trying to, but at the end of the day, we didn't lose any clients or anything.
But you didn't know that at first.
No.
Yeah. And it's like you wake up every day and you're like,
no. But I've had so many I've had a lot more amazing employee stories than that. I mean, with amazing employee stories.
I think it's just part of part of the journey. It is absolutely. I don't think I've ever met an entrepreneur that's been in business for at least 10 years that hadn't had somebody go off on their own, try to take all the business, sue you, accuse you, or drag you under the mud, or burn a bridge, which is amazing to me when
people will burn bridges, no problem. Yeah, they don't understand.
And LA is probably a lot different than Nashville. Yeah, Nashville is so small. Mm-hmm. There is no burning bridges. You can't do it here. And if you do it here, I mean, such a tight community, like that's one of the things that we get out of EO too, is like, we know so many connections. Like when we're hiring someone, I look at a resume and I'm like, oh, I know that guy. Hey, how did so-and-so do? And that's what we get to do when we have a good network. Well, one EOer told it to me like this when I first got here. He said, Scott, listen, one of the differences you're going to find here in Nashville is that when people, when they want to work with you, they want to know who your people are. They want to know who you're connected to. And that was fairly accurate, right? And it takes time to build those relationships. Something that EO does is it gives you that connection quickly. If you put yourself out, it gives you that connection. And I think something that I learned that I think is valuable is, as far as my employees go, whether or not they wrong the business in some way or whatever happened, my goal is always to exit them really well. We don't talk, we'd say good things, have a party for them and send them off, because as much as it is important to them, it's also important for the rest of the team to see that this is our culture. And if you have a bad egg, but you have a great culture, that great culture will expose the bad egg on its own. The team will bring it to light. This person does not fit. It will be extremely obvious. As the entrepreneur and as the business owner, your job is handling it. Slow to hire, quick to fire. Isn't that, there's some truth to that. Exit people out quickly. And the hard part is when they are valuable to your business. Yeah, you've got a great salesperson, but the energy isn't there and they're detrimental to your culture. That's a tough pill to swallow sometimes when they're responsible for the majority of your new sales. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Scott, thank you for joining me today. If you are in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're an entrepreneur and you're curious about this community called EO, come see why there's over 350 members. We're the largest chapter in the United States, gathered together in 8-person forums right here in Nashville, Tennessee, and talk about life and business. What's next? What decision you need to make? Have a community to do it with. Thanks for watching and hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.